After a down 2021 season, there are a lot of Mets fans that are ready to give up on Jeff McNeil. On today's show, I will preview Jeff McNeil's season and tell you why he is a great candidate to bounce back. Because let's remember, this is the same guy that led the league in hitting across a 3-year span. No one had a better batting average than Jeff McNeil from 2018 through 2020. And I think because of that, Mets fans should not be giving up on this homegrown talent.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, there's no sugarcoating it. Jeff McNeil is coming off a terrible season. I mean, he hit 251, a far cry from where he's been throughout his career, a 319 on base percentage, 360 slugging percentage, only 7 home runs, and a WRC plus of 93. Again, that is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. So he was a below average hitter last season with that 93 mark, coming in 7% below league average. You also look at his isolated power, and there was none, a 109 mark. That's another stat that'll tell you how frequently a player hits for extra bases, and he did not do a lot of that at all this past season. Still, if you look at the year he had as a whole, there was a couple months where he showed us glimpses, right? In July, he hit 351, a 419 on base, 494 slugging, a 155 WRC plus. Also had a good month in May. And if you really break down his season month by month, it was a really bad first month in April. He started to come around a bit. And remember, the whole team was struggling in April. So it's hard for me to blame any single Met for not hitting that month because there was just so much turmoil. The hitting coaches were fired. It was just a bad scene with that lineup. And really, all of them struggled. You go to May, he starts to come around, but then he pulls that hamstring that keeps him out of the lineup until the end of June. The beginning of his stretch off the IL, he struggled. Gets red hot in July, and then something happens down the stretch of the season where he just loses himself and had a really bad August and September to close things down. That led to those really bad stats that he had as well. Now, we could talk all about the clubhouse stuff and his fit with Lindor and what that means, but we've done that throughout the offseason. Today, what I want to do is focus on the numbers. And if you look at the projections for Jeff McNeil, what they are basically saying, if you go to Fangraphs, there are 7 projection models for the 2022 season. And really what they are basically doing here is they're hedging on Jeff McNeil to be better than he was last year, certainly, but not quite the player he was the first 3 years of his career. So you look at all of these different models, and they have him between 129 and 133 games played, between 506 and 574 plate appearances. You look at the home runs, between 11 and 14. If you remember, he had the 20-plus home runs in the 2019 season. Of course, that was the juice ball year. Who knows if he ever reaches that mark again. But really, when it comes to Jeff McNeil, you want him to be a functional cog in your offense. The projections have him scoring between 60 and 70 runs, having between 52 and 63 RBIs. All of that is pretty solid. They have the batting average between 264 and 282. No projection model having Jeff McNeil put up a 300 season, which is what he's going to do generally if he's right. He's going to hit over 300. That's what he has been throughout his career. Despite the down year last year, his career batting average is still 299. So that's a little bit surprising to me. They have his on-base percentage between 334 and 346. Again, I would expect it to be higher. I would expect him to get that on-base percentage over 350 because I don't think he's the player that he was last year. I think he's a lot closer to the guy who was in 2019, 2020, even 2018. Those years where he hit for a high average, which led to him getting on base at a high average. And then, his slugging percentage might not always be there, but he's going to at least provide elite bat to ball skills. He's going to put the ball in play. He's going to make things happen for you. And I've always felt that Jeff McNeil is a gamer. You look at where they have him at when it comes to weighted runs created plus, and it really is, again, right in the middle of where he was in his career the first 3 years and what he did last season. Because the projection models have him between 104 and 115 when it comes to his WRC plus. Now, if you look at his career WRC plus, it's at 126. So some quick math here. You add 126 to the 93 mark he put up last year and divide that by 2, and you come out with a 110 WRC plus if you average those two stats together. Now, the thing to me is the 126 career WRC plus includes the bad year last year and also is still a much larger sample size than that bad year. You look at the 3 seasons prior to 2021, and his WRC plus is 140. So I fall short of thinking that one season erases who this guy was. One down year means he can't bounce back to who he was. This is a player that's still in his prime. Maybe, all these talks about a trade, maybe that's good for him. Maybe Jeff McNeil needs to go somewhere else. I really don't know exactly what the story is in that clubhouse. I really can't tell you. I can only go based off of some of the reporting that we've seen. And honestly, it's only been a story here and there. I don't think this is a really full blown problem. I still think Jeff McNeil has a ton of great relationships in that clubhouse. He did come up in this organization. But let's just say he does get sent elsewhere. Don't be surprised if Jeff McNeil goes out and puts together an all-star season again. Don't be surprised if Jeff McNeil can win a batting title. And I know that might seem far-fetched after the year he just had, but this is a guy that was in line for a batting title in the first half of the 2019 season. In the second half, he sort of traded in some average for some power. That was the way his season broke down. But again, I referenced this in the cold open of the show if you're watching on YouTube. Jeff McNeil from 2018 through 2020 led the league in batting average across a 3-season span. No one hit for a higher average. So I take that stat alone and I just think people are writing this guy off way too soon. There's a lot more to his game that meets the eye. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the defensive versatility he brings. We're going to get to all of that stuff in just a minute. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fire coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so I referenced it, the fact that from 2018 through 2020, Jeff McNeil led the league in batting average. That mark, again, is at 319. Mookie Betts was second during that span with a 314 average. It's elite company atop the leaderboard when it comes to the top hitters with their batting average. The other guys that were up there was Anthony Rendon, Diesel LeMahieu, Michael Brantley. So Jeff McNeil was an elite company. And if you go a little bit further into his numbers, a 383 on base percentage in his first 3 seasons, a 501 slugging percentage. I've said this before, but if you look at his WRC plus in 2019, it was at 143, which is the exact same mark as Pete Alonso, who hit 53 home runs that season. Again, weighted runs created plus measures hitters based on a league average of 100, tries to tell you what they're bringing to their team when it comes to offensive value. And based on that one statistic, Jeff McNeil in 2019 was as valuable as the rookie of the year who had 120 RBIs. It doesn't always equate to the exact same thing on the scoreboard when you have one guy who's getting on base a ton and another guy that's just hitting monster home runs game after game. But I will say that that does show you that McNeil was not only worthy of being an all-star, but he proved that he can be one of the best hitters in baseball. And again, his WRC plus across that 3-year span was 140, which was one of the top 13 marks in baseball. He was tied with Brandon Nimmo in that 12th and 13th spot. Of qualified hitters, Jeff McNeil's strikeout percentage from 2008 to 2020 was at 12%, which was the 7th best mark in baseball. His on base percentage, which, as I said, was 383, was the 11th best mark. And again, the batting average ranked as the top mark. You go to his defensive value. A lot of people I've seen this offseason somehow came away with this idea that Jeff McNeil is not a good defensive player, which is just patently false if you look at the numbers. 1,379 and 2/3 innings at second base. He has produced 8 defensive runs saved at the position. This past year, it was 4 defensive runs saved. You look at outs above average at second base this past year, he was worth 4 outs above average. He was in the 90th percentile based on that metric. He was very good defensively at second base. Not even too far-fetched of a statement at all to say he was a top 10 defensive second baseman this season. You pair him with Lindor in 2022, the Mets are going to have great defense up the middle. They should still be able to build a better chemistry if the two of them are committed to the same thing, which is winning. And if you're looking at Francisco Lindor, a guy that you just gave $341 million to, and you're telling me that he can't work with the Jeff McNeil if it's for the betterment of the team, that's a real problem on Lindor's end, more so than it is on McNeil's end. I think the two guys can work it out and be just fine at the middle. And even without that, you look at his defense at other positions. 250 and a third innings at third base, worth 6 defensive runs saved. Didn't really play the position last year. 803 innings in left field, 4 defensive runs saved at that position. 330 innings in right field, 3 defensive runs saved. This guy plays hard. He makes a lot of really good plays. You remember him jumping into the net, catching that ball in right field. I remember him crashing against the wall in left field and hurting his 2020 season, making a hell of a play. And of course, he's made a lot of great plays in the infield as well. He brings you positive defensive versatility. And I look at him and I try to look around baseball. That's what we're going to do in a minute here. I want to talk about this idea of trading Jeff McNeil and why I think he really is, especially considering the shortened offseason here, maybe the most irreplaceable player on this roster when it comes to positional flexibility. I think he adds more to this team than anyone else when it comes to the ability to play that super utility role, because there's not another player the Mets have right now that can give you above average defense in the outfield and in the infield. And those are rare players to find in baseball altogether. You have the Kiki Hernandez of the world, Chris Taylor. There are some players out there that are considered quality defenders. But then you also have someone like Chris Bryant, who I have become maybe the chief Chris Bryant basher when it comes to this offseason. A role I never foresaw for myself, but there's been so much connection between the Mets and Bryant that I've really done a lot of digging on his numbers. And I've said it a million times. I'm sorry if it, comes off repetitive at this point, but the guy just posted terrible defensive metrics last year. So you compare that to Jeff McNeil, and if you're trying to fill that role as someone that, if Brandon Nimmo goes down, can go out and can play some left field for a couple months, or can slide into right field, or can play second base, or maybe if Eduardo Escobar goes down, can move over and be your third baseman and let a Robinson Cano or a Louis Guillorme play some second. Jeff McNeil can do all of that. And because of that, I really don't see how it makes any sense whatsoever to trade Jeff McNeil this offseason, particularly when his value is at an all-time low. I want to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about my favorite snack every day, which is Built Bar. Really does help me stay in good shape. Stay away from those candy bars, the empty sugar. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, low in fat, but they are high in protein. And they also have the Built Bar Puffs, which are the first ever protein infused marshmallows. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. They come covered in 100% real chocolate with some incredible flavors like the cinnamon churro, the coconut marshmallow, or the banana cream pie. Built Bar flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, or my personal favorite, cookies and cream, are all delicious. You want to try those as well. If you want to see what Built Bar has to offer, go to built.com. Make sure you use the promo code LOCK15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders their parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry, when instead you can go to rockauto.com, see a wide selection from a bunch of different manufacturers, find the cheapest option for you, saving 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more on the same auto parts that you might get from that chain store or a car dealership. Rock Auto is a family business that has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. So go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car and truck, and make sure you write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. So if you look at free agency right now, and if we were to just play out this scenario where the Mets were to trade Jeff McNeil as soon as the lockout ends, let's just say that Billy Epler has been on the phone with the Reds, and they already got a trade worked out, under the table. No one needed to know about it, but there was still some talks that were able to happen during this time, and they got a trade that's going to send Jeff McNeil to the Reds for Luis Castillo. That's going to give you now another pitcher to slot into your rotation, right up there with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, a perfect number 3 that has been an ace for that Reds team, someone who's under control for not only this year, but next year. Now your rotation is solidified. That's awesome, right? Okay. You just created a massive hole in your lineup, though. And you look at free agency, I don't know how you fill that hole, because if you're not going to go the Chris Bryant route, which we can talk about a little more in a minute here, you're talking about names like Josh Harrison, D. Gordon, Marwin Gonzalez. Maybe you reunite with Jonathan VR, Charlie Culberson. I mean, those are players that can go out and can give you that versatility to play in the infield and the outfield. But Marwin Gonzalez, unless he's getting the signs fed to him in 2017, can hit. D. Gordon hasn't been able to hit for years now. Also had a steroid suspension during his best years with the Marlins. And I mean, he's just been kind of toiling around between the minors and the majors the last couple of seasons. Josh Harrison can maybe surprise you and be good for a month, as he was in Washington this year, I believe. But is he going to put it together for a full season? He's also in his mid-30s. I don't know about that. Charlie Culberson, never been a great player. And Jonathan VR, while he just posted a nice season with the Mets, I'm not sure if he wants to come back unless he's guaranteed a starter's role. And even if he were to come back, I'm sorry, he is a big step down from Jeff McNeil, not only offensively with the ceiling these two players have, but also defensively. Jeff McNeil can play the outfield, which Jonathan VR has done in the past, but it's been years since he's done that. And Jeff McNeil grades out as a better defender at every position in the infield outside of shortstop, because he doesn't play shortstop. So with all that said, there's not a free agent signing that makes sense to me to come in and replace a Jeff McNeil if you were to trade him, unless you're getting Chris Bryant. And offensively, I'm not going to sit here and say that Chris Bryant doesn't bring great value. He would add another big bat to the middle of your lineup. He could easily put it all together for another season. And who knows, maybe he does have one more, all-star, top 10 MVP type season where he could turn back the clock a little bit and give you a semblance of what he was in 2016. At the same time, you look at the player he's been throughout his career and recent history, and it seems like a player that's at least plateaued, if not gone on a bit of a decline, particularly defensively, where he was among literally the worst defenders in baseball when it comes to the advanced metrics last season. So you look at all of that, and the idea of trading a Jeff McNeil, who is cheap, under control, for a guy in Castillo who you have for 2 years, but he's going to be a little bit expensive, not extremely expensive, but he's going to make more than McNeil the next 2 seasons. And then you could lose him, or you have to sign him to a big contract. And then to already then give out another big contract to Chris Bryant, well, that's just limiting a lot of your future spending. It limits your flexibility. What Jeff McNeil provides you is ultimate flexibility when it comes to roster construction. Because let's just say something comes up, right? Where, okay, here's an example. Brett Beatty ends up dominating this year, is just on an absolute tear. Maybe even has a month to be on a tear before the MLB season starts, because the minor league season might begin before the MLB season this year. And he ends up on this fast track. He's in AAA. And suddenly, before you know it, it's August and Brett Beatty has somehow cracked the starting lineup at third base. Well, now if you had to move Escobar to second, and let's say Nimmo got hurt for whatever reason, because Nimmo generally always gets hurt, well, okay, Jeff McNeil's now a left fielder again. If you got to play him in right field, you could do that. If you got to play him at third base because Escobar went down and Robinson Cano turned back the clock and is giving you a decent season and you want him to be your starting second baseman, you can do that. So all of these things, to me, it just does not make any sense to trade Jeff McNeil, hurt your current team and also your future teams, because any season that he's under control, you have the ability to move him all over the place. And also, let's just say he goes out and has a great season this year. Well, now his trade value is going to be a lot higher, and you can likely sell him on being the player he's been throughout his entire career, as opposed to selling him off of his down season, where there's going to be more doubt than ever as to what he's going to be moving forward. It doesn't make sense to me. And again, I look at a hitter for 3 seasons. That's a large sample size. 3 seasons in Major League Baseball. No one hit for a higher average across that 3-year window than Jeff McNeil. To think that that guy just completely forgot to hit in 1 season and will never hit for a high average again, to me, it's ludicrous. And if the Mets were to trade Jeff McNeil, he's just going to become the next Justin Turner, the next Daniel Murphy, the next guy, Travis d'Arnaud even, who leaves the Mets and comes back to torment them for years to come. I really do believe that. Jeff McNeil should be a huge part of the 2022 Mets. I expect him to have a really nice bounce back season. And you know what? If I could throw some money on him winning a batting title right now, and the odds are, the lowest for him to possibly pull that off, to me, that'd be a wise investment, because I've been saying it really since I started this podcast, before the 2019 season, my first show, and we were breaking down the roster. Whenever Jeff McNeil came up, I've always said this is a guy that will win a batting title at some point in his career. And even with what we saw last season, I still believe that to be the case. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is where you want to go for all your daily gambling needs. You can follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.